Anyway, we're going to wind up very soon. But I just want to show you why Ramesses is the key to all this. Now, it's all about this thing called the Israel stealer. Have you heard of that? It's the most famous inscription in Egypt because it's a great stealer by King Meneptah, which mentions Israel at the bottom of it, which is why it's called the Israel stealer. Here is the name Israel at the bottom. You can hardly make it out, but if I just highlight the text, you have the two reeds again that we saw earlier, which is the Y, yish, then you have S, then you have the R, the mouth, Ri, Al. Now, in Egyptian, there is no letter for L, so they use the letter for R. So, Israel, and then you have the throw stick, which is the determinative figure for an Asiatic or a Semite. Then you have two figures, the man and the woman, seated together, with plural strokes at the bottom. Now, those plural strokes indicate that this is a people. So it's the people of Israel that's written here, or the nation of Israel. Now, remember that Merenptah is the successor of Ramesses II. Ramesses II reigned for 66 years. His son came to the throne in old age, and he recorded this inscription. He wasn't really in a position to do much fighting himself. He was rather too old to do so. And nevertheless, he mentions the defeat of a people of Israel. Now, what is the context of this? Well, the text actually says, Israel, and then it continues, is laid waste. His seed, because his, referring to Jacob, Israel, is no more. That's a standard phrase within Egyptian texts for defeated people. It doesn't mean anything specific. It just means we've defeated Israel. They're conquered. Now, the Merenptah stealer indicates a nation of Israel already existing in the Holy Land during the late 19th dynasty. Now, if you think about it, if Moses was a contemporary of Ramesses and the Israelites had left in the reign of Ramesses II, how on earth could they be a nation already established in Canaan? They were wandering around the wilderness for 40 years. This doesn't make sense. If we look at the context of the text, it's actually a poem. It actually goes for several lines describing lots of different nations, and I'll just show you the actual poem itself. It says, the princes are prostrate, saying shalom, and it does actually say shalom in the text. Not one raises his head amongst the nine bows. The nine bows are the traditional enemies of Egypt. Desolation is for Chehanu. Chehanu is Libya. Hatti, the Hittites, is pacified. Plundered is Canaan with every evil. Carried off is Ashkelon. Seized upon is Gezer. Yanoam is made non-existent. Now, there are 4 major towns in the Holy Land. Then it goes, Israel is laid waste. His seed is no more. Charu, which is Syria, has become a widow because of Egypt. Then the last 2 lines are, all lands together are pacified. Everyone who was restless has been bound. Now, people have studied this text and realized something. It's actually balanced. It's actually what we call a reflection poem. In other words, if I put the units in, you can see it starts with 2 lines, 2 sentences, and it ends with 2 general sentences. So there's actually a pattern evolving here. It's another one of these patterns. It then has, B, 2 major entities. Chehanu is the entire Libya. Hatti is the entire Turkey. Then it has Israel, wherever that is, and the entire Syria. So in this context, Israel is a major power. It's as big as the Hittites. It's as big as the Libyans. It's as big as Syria. And then in the middle, we get 4 towns. Canaan is Gaza. Ashkelon, is one of the Philistine cities. Gezer and Yanoam. So this tells us straight away, this is not a bunch of Israelites wandering around the desert. This is an actual kingdom we're dealing with here, a major power. That is not possible if Moses is a contemporary of Ramesses II. It's out of the question. Whereas if Ramesses II is a contemporary of Solomon, which we just worked out because he's Shishak, then we have a completely different ballgame here. We have the kingdom of Solomon mentioned here in this text. So here are the inscriptions of that text actually on the walls of Karnak. The poem is actually a scribe comes along, he wanders along the walls of Karnak, he writes down all the defeated peoples. And he makes this poem for his master, Pharaoh Meneptah. So here is the Libyans being fought, Chehenu being defeated by the Pharaoh. Here are the Hittites on the same wall being taken away in captive. And then we have the city of Canaan, the next one on the list here, Gaza, with the Shasu Bedouin. There's the name, you can read it here, Demien, which is the city of Canaan, Gaza. Now, all these places are located on the wall reliefs of Seti I, who is the grandfather of Meneptah. So the first three defeated enemies of Egypt, Chehenu, Hatti, and Canaan, are drawn from the victorious campaigns of Seti I at Karnak. So if we then go round to the other side of the hypostyle hall to look at the campaigns there, the remaining 5 defeated enemies, Ashkelon, Gezer, Yanoam, Israel, and Karu, Syria, are drawn from the victorious campaigns of Ramesses II, which are on the far side of the temple. So if we look at a map or a plan, this is the hypostyle hall between the second pylon and the third pylon. This is where the Shoshenq relief is, outside here. He's campaigning into northern Israel. And what we have is the battle against Libya. Chehenu is on the outside wall here. On the upper register is the battle against the Hittites, Hatti, and then we have Canaan on this wall here. All those are Seti I campaigns. Then we cross over to the far side, and we get the campaigns of Ashkelon, Gezer, Yanoam, and Israel there, and we get the campaign against Syria along here. So if you walk around Karnak, it matches exactly with the poem. Okay, so these are not the victories of Meneptah. They are the victories of his dynasty, his grandfather and father. He's too old to do any of this. So he's claiming for his dynasty as he sits on the throne, as I look out upon my empire, this is what my dynasty has achieved. So here we have a golden opportunity to actually look at the defeat of Israel on the walls of Karnak. Instead of having a text, we now have visuals we can look at. So I'm going to show you what we have of that. Sadly, it's very scanty. So here is the Syria wall on the outside of the temple, and we're going to go over here to this area to look at this particular wall. We call it the Ashkelon wall today. In the center, we have the Hittite treaty here, and we have 4 campaigns, one there, one above, mostly destroyed, and then tantalizingly just a few blocks of a scene on this side. And unfortunately, that's where Israel's located. So we have Ashkelon, Gezer, Yanoam, and Israel. So I'm going to take you to look at those few blocks. Here we see the campaign against Ashkelon. Here's the town here. Do you remember the story in the Bible of the king of Moab offering his own child when the Israelites come to besiege the city? Well, here we have the king dropping his own child off the battlements in sacrifice to stop Ramesses II from defeating them. But above this scene, here's the name Ashkelon, Ashkelana. This is what we're interested in. That is what's left of the battle against Israel. Now, you can't see very much, I admit, but when you examine it closely, there's a melee here. There's lots of bodies being killed here. We have a horse here. We have a chariot wheel. We have a larger horse, the back legs of a larger horse. I'll try and help you out with this. And then we have captives being taken away with long gowns on down to their ankles, taken off as prisoners towards Egypt. Now, that's what we have today, but what I was able to do was take a similar scene from another part of Karnak to reconstruct that so you can see what it is. So watch this happen and you'll see what the scene is all about. So now you can see clearly what it is. You have Ramesses II and his chariot over here on the missing section. His chariot horses here, the large ones, prancing with the reins of the king going across here. And underneath the horses of the chariot team, is a smaller chariot with a small wheel, in which we have Semites falling dead. And the horse, if you notice here, the tiny horse is running away from the battle, running away from Ramesses in defeat. So what is this representing? There you can see the horse in more detail. You'll notice here, if we go closer, the head of the horse is down, exhausted. It's not a proud Egyptian horse. This is a defeated Israelite horse driving a chariot, or pulling a chariot. Now think about this. If Moses, Yul Brynner, was a contemporary of Charlton Heston, Ramesses II, and this is Ramesses II fighting against Israel, and Israel has got chariots, there's something very wrong there. Moses didn't have chariots. Moses took the people out of Egypt without chariots. If you look through your Bible, you won't find mention of Israelite chariots until the time of late David and Solomon. Solomon, who built chariot cities. All the time before that, whenever the Israelites, who were basically an infantry group, fought against people with chariots, they would lead them into quagmires and swamps so that the chariots became inactive. Or, for instance, when Saul fought the Philistines, he moved his troops up Mount Gilboa so they couldn't use the chariots. The enemy couldn't use the chariots on the slopes. So, for example, in Joshua, the Lord said to Joshua, "You will hamstring the horses and burn the chariots. We have no use for them. We don't know how to ride them. We don't know how to drive them." And a scholar, typical reference from a scholar here, only during the monarchy period did the horse become important for chariot warfare. That reinforces my argument that Shishak is Ramesses, Shishak, because in his time he was fighting against the United Kingdom of Solomon and his successor Rehoboam, who did have chariots. And we know that Ramesses fought against Israel somewhere in the hill country.
So, David, what you're suggesting is that the Merneptah poem is reestablishing the greatness of the great defeats that the dynasty, Seti the first and
Seti the first and Ramesses
the second, and that those defeats then are visually represented on the Karnak temple.
Yeah. Essentially what you've got is a pharaoh in his mature years, maybe 65 years old, sitting on his throne, needs some monument to celebrate something, wants to be proud of something. He hasn't done much in his own reign. So he thinks, now what have my family done? Well, all over the walls of Karnak are the records of these wonderful campaigns. So he sends a scribe off with a notepad, a bit of papyrus, says, write down the history of my ancestors, my grandfather and father. Write down what they achieved, and I'll sign the bottom of it and say, this is my dynasty, I'm proud of this. So we can then say that Ramesses was the one who fought against Israel, whatever that fight was, whatever that battle was. So that's the situation we're in. We're in a situation where Ramesses has no longer got the bad press of being the pharaoh of the oppression, the pharaoh of the Exodus. He's now a king of Egypt who came up and virtually put an end to the rule of Solomon's dynasty, if you like, with Rehoboam. Rehoboam became a servant of Egypt once this plundering had taken place, as the Bible says.